And call the meeting to order. It is 11 o'clock.
No, it isn't.
Excuse me for being late. It's a weather delay. I didn't decide whether I was coming or not. Anyway, welcome to the Enterprise Committee. Today we have a couple of presentations. There are a couple of different presenters. And have some discussion, I hope, about we have solid waste services, and then MLMP is going to talk. One of the major topics that we were going to chat with, certainly with MLP, was the replacement of the lines, or undergrounding the lines, and that was Mr. Constant's request. So I'll blame that on him.
I will proudly take that blame.
But also we have first Solid Waste Services, who's going to talk a little bit about the master plan and what's going on. So without further ado, you're up.
Okay, thanks for having me. Mark Spafford, General Manager, Department of Solid Waste Services. We're not talking fair cards this meeting, but we are going to be talking about our master plan. And we brought our Chief Engineer, Mark Madden, and our consultant that we've hired, Tetra Tech, who's the #1 solid waste analytics firm in the United States, to help us try to start looking at what the future holds for the Department of Solid Waste Services for the next 5 to 50 years, whether it's programs, different things we're going to be looking at as far as recycling and diversion is concerned, facility upgrades at the transfer station, at the Anchorage Regional Landfill, maybe out in Birdwood. But what I really wanted to do with this opportunity, they've been up here for the past couple of days doing interviews with different stakeholders, recyclers, people with the administration, and I wanted to make sure that they got the opportunity to chat with all of you to see if you had, any thoughts on, where you saw the department going, different programs that maybe you think that there's holes in that maybe we could improve on. Any ideas with how to improve diversion, because the main question that we're trying to answer with this plan is what do we do on January 1st, 2051 when ARL is closed? And so what we're trying to do is tailor our operations, our programs, our facility improvements to try to meet that goal, because obviously we have a natural resource with the Anchorage Regional Landfill. We're lucky in the fact that we have room until 2050. So a lot of communities aren't in that same bag, and so we're lucky to have that. However, we should be proactive with managing it, and so the sooner we start, the better. And we've already kind of started with recycling. We've got some diversion programs, but what I'm hoping that this plan will yield is actual framework for what we should do and goals that we should shoot for. And so that's kind of the intro. I didn't have a formal presentation. I just wanted to keep it, kind of just as a conversation or discussion. Let you all ask questions. Let our team from Tetra Tech help out. We've got our board chair, our committee chair, Radhika, who's also joined us as well. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there and then see if there's any questions or comments along those lines.
Thank you, Mark. Questions from
that
was a pause?
The first plan, we haven't done a plan in over 30 years. So the last one we finished in #87. The results of that were build ARL, which we did, and build the transfer station, which we did. And so that's kind of where we're at now. So we haven't done one in a long time, and so we're excited.
So I'll start in terms of questions. You're up to speed now in terms of the transfer station, recycling operations, and you say you have capacity. What, a number of cells? 1 cell left?
Correct. Yes, we still have expansion. A couple of expansion projects that we have to do at the landfill.
Okay.
So.
But then the future is something we have to come up with by 2051.
Yes.
Okay. Questions? Anybody? Nobody?
I will. So on recycling, you and I have been working on glass. I mean, it seems like aluminum's always been valuable, and that's easy. Paper is cheaper and more difficult, but it also biodegrades and is less. So it seems to me glass is the hardest nut, it doesn't go away in any appreciable time and isn't tremendously valuable. Tell me about the what you're doing and what we can do more of on glass recycling that keeps it out of your landfill.
I think the easiest, the
Sure.
quickest win that we had last year was partnering with AWWU and having them use basically the whole stockpile that the local recycling entity had collected and ground up for the past 3 years that they weren't able to figure out what to do with it, and use it. They used up essentially all of it as pipe bedding material. And so that's kind of the quickest win that we found thus far for the amount of glass that's collected every year here.
It's this seesaw of supply and demand, right? You had too much supply for a while, and we're looking for places it can be used. And bedding for water projects is a great one, and you and I work together on that, and we're there at AWU to get it done. I always thought the next step of that, after AWU had a success, and it sounds like they have, for us to either informally or formally get the municipality in general to use it. So AWU on its projects, but on all our road grading, all our water projects. What do I have to do that? What's that look like? Either to you or Mr. Falsey, how do I take AWU's success in using ground glass as a substrate and urge or demand that the muni uses it in all its projects?
Well, the easiest the easiest way to do that is pass something or make it a policy that municipal departments will use a portion of this as within their construction projects, and so it's not based on myself being having a good relationship with AWWU and you having stepped in to help to make that happen. It's got to be cemented somehow, because as soon as I go and somebody doesn't like recycled glass anymore, or think it's that important, you lose the opportunity. The potential is there for glass to fall off the priority list again and for it to build back up there. Because a lot of it was based on personalities and people not being willing to just take a look at the fact that it is a good material, you can use it, and it really doesn't cost as much as you think it does. I mean, it was price comparable with typical backfill material.
It's a really solid engineering product and it's price competitive.
Yep.
Well, has AWU issued a report on what? So I'd like to cite somehow to what AWU did. Will you get me their policy or any report they've had of it worked fine, or here are the. I don't think there were big difficulties, but if there were small difficulties, I'd like to know about it. But if you'll get me that, I'll do what you suggested. And then the other thing that AWU did, and maybe this is to Mr. Falsey, is they used it as, they used ground glass as gripper on the front, on the walks. And it has, once people get over the idea that they're walking on glass, right, and it's ground, it isn't sharp, it's both good gripping and reflective, right? And so in the winter, it's colorful and nice. But they had a good success with that as well, right? So you could do that, Mr. Falsey.
That's true. I think in terms of the SWS master plan, what that would feed into is sort of what we want the waste streams to look like going forward. And I think maybe we should invite Tetra Tech to whet some of your appetites and sort of get the creative juices flowing, the kind of things that they've been hearing. But generally, there are big buckets of things to think about for SWS as you look to the distant time horizon. Mark said, what happens the day the ARL is closed? The plan can approach that in a couple of ways. One, it can say, let's start looking for the next ARL now. Preview is probably not an Anchorage. Or we can say, let's start figuring out how we become a zero waste community, where we don't need another ARL. There are pros and cons to that.
Or in between those is, can I push that date off a decade by practices,
Can
right?
we just kick it down the road 25 years by changing how we're doing our waste streams now? Do we care about recycling in a way that we didn't care about when we did a master plan in 1987? And if we do, what does that look and feel like? We're currently collecting recyclables, mixed recyclables curbside and garbage curbside. Should we be also looking at segregating organics? What happens to the ARL itself when the ARL is closed? Does it just sit there passively producing gas and turns into a moose range, or turn it into something else? What we're trying to do is take one of these unique moments where we're not looking at putting out the fire that's going on right now or dealing with the next quarter budget revisions, but actually peek our head up and think creatively and thoughtfully about what happens over the longer term. So maybe with that sort of set piece, there's more that Tetra Tech can put on the table.
Totally stole my thunder.
Try to
Oh,
steal-
introduced it, yeah.
Can you come up here? Sure. Sorry, I'm Christina, our guest, with Tetra Tech, and I'm managing the project. I'm very happy to be helping SWS with this long-term plan. And we are going to be looking at short, medium, and long-term strategies, as Mark said, to provide some guidance over the next near term and then when the landfill closes. But Mr. Falsey summarized a lot of what we're going to be looking at, which is in the long term for ARL, what can we do to optimize the capacity that's there now? We're working with Mark Madden and his operations folks and engineers on ways to improve efficiencies at the landfill to optimize capacity. We're identifying a couple areas of potential expansion. Mark mentioned the areas that are already planned for full development of that site, but we are going to be looking at potential expansion because when that landfill does close, the options that are available are going to be very expensive. You're looking at pretty expensive alternative technologies. You're looking at potential exports, out of the municipality. So we're going to try and look at what those long-term replacement costs are and try and compare them to maybe some of the programs that can be implemented now to preserve capacity in terms of diversion. And, if there's cost implications with implementing some of those programs, that we look at the long-term savings by extending the life of that landfill. So we're going to be looking at, we're going to do a comprehensive review of your whole system. And then we're also looking at the central transfer station. It's a pretty dated facility, so we're trying to improve operations there, trying to streamline some of the recycling that goes on there and doing it more effectively with other recyclers within the municipality. So that's a lot of what we've been doing this week is a lot of data gathering, meeting with a lot of the stakeholders and major players in solid waste to get ideas from them on how each of the components and the players can work together to preserve the situation that you have right now. We do a lot of work, Tetra Tech, throughout the U.S. We also have Lauren Kwan here, who's out of our Vancouver office, so do a lot of work in Canada as well, in Yukon territories and areas that are similar in climate to Anchorage. So we have a lot of resources to draw from to try and see what ideas we can come up with to help with your system. But you do have a lot of constraints. You are pretty unique here. Every municipality is, but you definitely have some limitations on your backhaul and what you can do with recycling. So we're kind of gathering all that data right now to be able to provide a plan that is going to work for you and not something that's going to sit on a shelf, but really guide policy. You had mentioned potential EPR or extended producer responsibility, which is big in a lot of municipalities that we work with, which is really implementing policies that you have for purchases or having certain departments use recyclable material. So we'll be taking a look at that and see how we can implement some new programs.
Yeah, I thought there was a significant possibility that adjacent land on the military could be used as the next dump site. It's not a guarantee, it's federal stuff, but you said likely out of town, and I'd heard that before, but then I thought more recently there'd been the likelihood or possibility of using land that is adjacent to the site but is on military. What's the status of it? Which impression is correct?
So I think we're looking at that. We've identified some adjacent land. Mark can speak to that.
We've been talking with the military since 1986 when they cut the original allotment in half, and the conversations heat up and go away. We had a very heated conversation, or a very interested conversation up to about almost 2 years ago, and then they changed commanders. So it's kind of a lot of what you deal with the military, but the piece that is to the due west of us, where we're at now, it's kind of a little triangular piece.
Yeah.
When you're coming into town and you see where you look down the old Davis Highway, that whole stretch from there back to the landfill is pretty much that parcel.
Do you need high air support? That is, do you need us to ask our congressional delegation to spotlight that?
Basically, what we need to do is get back in touch with the command at JBear. As I say, they change every 2 years or so, and so we were having a very productive conversation between Mike Abbott and the previous commander. But when he left, the new guy came in, and they always give you well, we got to get our feet back on the ground and then come back and talk with
Okay.
us. So
I don't want to get involved if you're having productive conversations. On the other hand, when the players change like that, you may need for Congress just to set that policy of we are urging you, telling you whatever to do that, and then that can help make it happen rather than it might happen.
I would still start at the base level. I would
Sure.
I think we need
So
to
why
get
don't you
back.
let us know when and if you hit a logjam on it.
Well, and you should also note that conversation involves including too. So there's a history here where we had the North Anchorage Land Agreement in 1982 that talked about what's going to happen to the military baselands if and when JBear is ever finally accessed. And then 1986-ish, there's kind of a Tony Knowles goes to Ted Stevens and gets an act of Congress that says MOA gets the landfill, and that was not well received by Klutna, suffice to say. So if you were to expand out of this current footprint, I think at the very least we would have a three-way conversation with Klutna and JBear.
Great.
And that was pretty much what we were doing in the last round.
As a general rule, the military is usually open to good relations with the local community, and so anytime a new commander come in, it's a good idea for the Muni to go say, hey, hi, welcome. Here's where we interact, and here's our needs. I'm glad to hear that we're looking at the future now. Now there's other waste disposal people in town, and do they ship glass out down to Seattle, or are we using what's available in Alaska?
I mean, that's part. I don't think they don't ship anything.
No.
It's just too heavy.
Okay.
It's not.
They ship paper. Is that what they do?
Yeah, they ship lots of paper,
Cardboard.
lots of plastic, lots of cardboard. Cardboard's probably the most valuable
Yeah.
of all of what we ship out of here.
Cardboard is?
Cardboard, yeah.
Not aluminum, not.
Well,
The cardboard is very, very valuable
Yeah, it is.
compared to a lot of things.
Right, because that's collected on a commercial basis, so it seems to be a lot higher volume. And I think a lot of the glass is heavy and it's not well received at the facilities in Seattle, especially newer facilities. Nobody really likes to deal with glass.
I do.
well, I think we found a use for it that is useful to all of us, but certainly it's better than shipping it out, I think.
Well, I mean, that's the one thing that's been very eye-opening is just how complicated recycling truly is, from like what you can recycle in your residential rural cart all the way to the logistics, like everything in Alaska about how it gets out of here, and all the politics that are kind of out of our control between the different corporations that subsidize the backhaul to Seattle. There's all the issues like you can't put glass in there, and plastic bags muck up everything, and then you've got the whole deal with China and the markets there, and it's a really confusing. Even if you do it every day, it's still really confusing, and there's so many variables that are outside of your control. The easiest thing for us to do would be to figure out a way to use it all here. However, it's just not economical at this point, and nobody's invented what that is. And so that's the difficulty that we have.
I think once every so often, maybe once a year or something, we need to stuff the bills with with the explanation as to how you separate what you separate. And
Yep.
I know I haul my glass to the recycle center down, and everything else goes in the recycle bin. So.
Yeah, we have talked about, and we do have Dow, a local firm on our team that is going to be helping us with some of the outreach components, because that is pretty key to the success of any of these programs. So we have already started talking about increased public education and awareness, and SWS is already doing some of that, or has been doing a lot of that with Alaska Waste, but we'll definitely have recommendations for expanding those efforts.
Got to build habits. Dick, I think you were next.
I think Eric covered most of it. It's just
Okay.
that we need to get a hold of our congressional delegation because the military takes direction from Congress. And the military is in a direction right now to try and maximize the amount of money they've got for their land. So anytime we're using military land, they're going to want to have money coming into the Department of Defense. But I really think we need to get a congressional delegation now because they give direction to the military. Military every 2 years changes the commanders out here. They start from ground zero again. Congress is a bit more stable than that, we hope.
Our representatives
I said we hope.
have been in office for a while now, and they
John Nunn's been
have
on
pretty
there
good
as long as I've been
relations.
on the assembly.
I think he's been on there longer than I've been alive.
Yeah, but you told me you were in the 7th grade when I came on.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I think I've heard
Thank
that
you.
in the news this 7th grade issue recently. Chris, you're next.
Yep, thank you. Two points, two questions. One question, 1 point. Timeline, what's the timeline for this master planning process?
It'll be completed over the next 11 months.
And the public process will be with Dell, so I just heard?
They're helping with the public outreach. Yep.
So next 11 months, so that puts us to October.
Yeah, we are working with the Solid Waste and Recycling Advisory Committee.
Mhm.
So we met with them yesterday, and I've been on a call with them before, and we'll be including them in the actual planning process before it actually comes back to your committee.
Okay, thank you. And then, I always thought they ought to set up a mining plan out there, segregate the glass into an area and just build a mound of it. And at some point when it's economic and a use is found, go out there with tractors and dig it on up and put it to use. So, but I don't know your business.
Maybe, and that could be a thing. Just having it there has its own cost. I think it's more of a seesaw thing. You up the usage until you're using all that you got, and then you up more and you find another usage. There are uses for it, but you kind of have to keep it in some balance.
And we just store it in containers on site. Is that
What's
right?
The glass?
Yeah.
No, we don't store it at all.
You don't store it at all?
Yeah, so it goes to a local recycler,
Okay.
and then they do the storage of it.
So then the muni buys it back from them
We don't
when we
buy
use it?
We don't buy it back. It would be like for the AWU job, it was the contractor. I mean, yeah, indirectly through a capital project, right? It went back to that. So
Keeping the economy
Nice
going.
to eliminate the middleman.
Yeah, exactly, jobs.
Other questions? Amy?
A couple. I'm so glad I'm taking that pollution prevention class because this all makes sense to me. So I have a couple questions about the glass particularly. Do we actually have, I hear how it's being used now and how it was used from AWU, but what is the quantity like to, I guess my question is if you make a policy or you make a law or whatever, do you have a quantity to support the need?
yeah, I mean, they don't have like estimated. There's not like typical values that we get or they collect each year, Mark. Or
Well, we know how much we've collected historically going all the way back to the 80s, but the reality is it's a couple thousand tons a year.
Yeah, I
It's
was
not a
thinking about
huge
It's not huge.
amount. Glass is much more of a visual recycling thing than a real productive effort. Because it's very expensive to process it. You were talking about the middleman.
Yeah.
That's why it costs. That's why we have to buy it back because it does cost money.
Somebody has to grind it up
Yeah,
to
exactly.
appropriate size.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's helpful to know, because I would be very cautious. I think it's great to have with municipal departments coordinating with each other to have policies, but when we start dictating a law, you need to use this percentage, it can become a problem, especially if that percentage is not available. And so that would be my number one concern with making it a law versus, just something that we do whenever it is available. But the other thing that, and Mark, I know your solid waste services, not necessarily, street maintenance, but city managers here. So one of the things we have to think about when we're talking about potential uses and preventing, being as environmentally friendly as we can, one of the topics you brought up was luminosity, or somebody did. What other departments, are we looking with pavements, and we're looking at other departments, are we looking at changing some of the chemical components to increase some of the luminosity, I'm saying the word wrong, but some of the reflectiveness in the pavement? Have you had this discussion?
I have not had this discussion yet, but I'm happy to take that back to the human folks and see if that's.
Well, and the reason I bring it up is because when we're talking about, we use a lot of recycled pavement, right? So I had my driveway done this year, and I used recycled asphalt versus going to straight pavement because I wanted to use recycled asphalt. I was trying to do my part. But the one thing I've learned is that they can add like different white aggregates to the pavement, and what it does is in the long term, it can reduce the amount of lighting you need to put on the road. So ultimately, in the big picture, you're reducing your greenhouse gas emissions by using less energy, blah, 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 blah. So this is why I say when we look at SWS, we need to look collectively at the bigger picture too, and look at, okay, not just are we using recycled glass, are we using recycled pavement whenever possible, but are we actually looking at the composition of aggregates that we're putting into the pavement to potentially help the big picture. So anyways, that was a different department. But when it comes to NALA, Bill, this is a question for you. So NALA was an act of Congress that took these three entities, Clutna, the federal government, the city, and put them together and said these properties that are jointly used for this public purpose, XYZ, this is how we're going to do it. Does it define the actual geographic location of the landfill, or does it just say in general whenever the properties are generally used? Because my question is, if we expand the landfill, do we actually have to amend NALA, or how does that work?
So, it's a couple moving pieces. The original NALA contract in 1982, as I recall, does not anticipate the landfill at all. It says, I'll show you a picture actually, it might be able to pull it up in real time. Look at that. I like it or what?
Oh, look at that.
This pink area, if and when it is ever released by the J-Bear, goes to the municipality of Anchorage and Clutna, 50-50 tenants in common, unless we decide to divvy it up. But there was a special provision that said the Muni could skim 3,000 acres for public interest lands that it could take first, and it could be parks, it could be kind of whatever, it's underdefined. The term landfill is not used at all in NALA, and then sort of outside of the, what should I say? Beyond the NALA process, there was a separate act of Congress that says J-Bear shall transfer to the municipality of Anchorage the landfill, which is in this pink area. And that sort of scrambled the NALA participants, and the way we accounted for that after the fact was to say, well, that'll just take down some of our 3,000 acre entitlement. So now I've almost lost the thread of the original question.
No, I was asking if there was a specific parameter that was defined in that changing the landfill boundaries. Does it require an act of Congress to change NALA, basically?
I don't think so. You actually go ahead.
There's a couple things. One, if we're able to successfully negotiate the piece to the west of where we are, which was included in the original appropriation from Congress, that's already taken care of. The whole process, it falls into that 3,500 acre public lands, because realistically that they use the term public lands to be streets, utility access, public any public facility, and the landfill was considered a public facility, so that it fits into that public use area. So basically, we've used 10% of our 3,500 acres right now.
Is the port included in that? Okay.
What is south of the boundary?
But I mean, okay. The port, they have the access, but is that our land at this point? Or are we just using it from the military?
Yeah, it's sort of a hodgepodge of land ownership.
Yeah.
Part of it is ours, part of it is railroad land.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of it is Jaber land, but none of it is Nala land. The dividing line
Right.
for the military baselands for North Anchorage Navigator purposes and
Just,
Eagle River. I mean, it's
we need to move on because we got MLP to deal with too. But how about Matsu? What do they do with their glass? Or do they recycle?
I'm not sure. Do you know, Mark?
They have done a few things. They crush a little bit of it and use it for to stabilize some of the roads in their landfill occasionally. Really minimal use.
Minimal recycle
Yeah.
in Matsu? Okay.
That's the problem everywhere. The only place that's really been able up here to use it is Homer because they got such nasty soil down there. So they use it just to stabilize the road to get into their facility.
Just to keep it from sinking into
Yes.
the. Anyway, okay.
I mean, we're actually lucky. We're like one of the few entities, around the country that are actually using it beneficially.
Yeah.
Because it's just an albatross for a lot of places because they don't know what to do with it.
They're not as creative
Use
as we
for
are.
it. But I guess one last thing before we get kicked out.
Yeah.
I want this to be a collaborative process. I don't want to do it in a vacuum. I encourage you to ask questions because I want to inform you and talk about how complicated recycling and how complicated stuff is out at the landfill as much as possible because I want you to know everything. It's an open book. I want to be transparent, so you can feel free to ask questions, throw out ideas, whenever you feel like it, because that's what I get paid to do is answer those questions, and I want you to be as educated as possible.
Don't wait for us to ask. If you've got something to transmit, please do. And we're certainly open and willing and want to hear from you. So, any other closing on this particular topic?
I just have one.
Amy?
I would say, to Tetra Tech, as you guys are developing your plan, and I'm sure this is a given, I just have to say it. But as you're developing your plan, these topics have obviously sparked my curiosity, so I've really worked to learn more about it. But we still have to have that reasonable balance of cost benefit. I mean, this is key in any recycling program, and I know oftentimes recycling is expensive, and that's why a lot of communities don't do it. But if we could weave it in, but I don't want to get so green that we're crazy off the scale's expensive. Right. I mean, so it's important that we have that very reasonable balance between programs that we can implement and bolster, improve upon, and be environmentally friendly and sustainable for as long as we possibly can. So that's important to me, but I don't want to go crazy and bust the bank either.
Right. And we do appreciate that comment because you can go, and we certainly work with other municipalities who, the environment is a much higher priority than cost or economics, but, it does need to be a balance of both.
Thank you. Thank you for your help. MLMP.
I know. They did.
Oh, you can go crazy, yeah. I'm glad that pollution prevention class is coming.
Mark gave you the short straw. Huh?
Right, sorry about this one. I'll share this with you. I'm gonna make another copy for you.
I've got one.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, give one to him.
I brought my own.
I give mine to Rose, which is the most important.
Okay. Once I get through with it, I'll give
I'm
one.
Gary Yukron from Municipal Light and Power. I'm the division manager for engineering. And on behalf of Mark Johnson, he asked me to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about Tile 21 and our underground, overhead to underground efforts. Brought with me Jake Foe. He is our senior engineer, and he's been doing the project now since 2009. We've been doing Tile 21 since 2005 when the was, when Title 21 was enacted, and pursuant to the ordinance, what you have is there is a copy of a 5-year plan. And we're asked to go ahead, we're directed to go ahead and present the 5-year plan to the Director of Planning, as well as to community councils, all the other utilities, and the other departments within the municipality, so we can do collaboration on projects. We do a lot of collaboration with PM&E, with AWU, with NSTAR, to make sure that we're only digging up the ground once. I think that our presidents would appreciate that we only dig up the properties once. So within that, within there, it shows your 5-year plan. It also shows what we spend per year and what we spent in the past year. And we are directed to spend at least 2% of our rolling 3-year average of our annual gross revenues. So in there we show you that how much we've been spending. I think coming up in 2018 is probably going to be one of our most contentious years that we've been doing Title 21. It's only because of a lot of the attention that we've been receiving, especially from the residents in undergrounding. Last year, in 2016, through Mr. Trainee and Ms. Gray Jackson's efforts, they had to send a letter out to the telecoms to be able to say, hey, you need to go ahead and underground your stuff. And amazingly enough, they were in the projects that had happened. This year, through a resident from Bootleggers Cove, they had asked, hey, when are you going to go ahead and underground our stuff over there? Are you going to underground with MLMP in 2018? And GCI responded, hey, we're thinking about it. We don't know yet. But for 2017, for some reason, through this whole year, they said that they weren't going to participate in projects. And at the very end, said, oh, yeah, we're going to jump into projects. And we did a couple projects here downtown. So GCI did participate in 2017 projects, and ACS did not. Next year, within our projects, we've got about $4 million worth of undergrounding that we're going to do here in the downtown area, and then about $2 million over there in $1.9 million over in Bootleggers Cove. So between now and 2023, it shows there. We're going to be going into the Airport Heights area. We're going to be going into South Anchorage, or South in the Arctic area, Arctic and Arctic Boulevard, north and south of Northern Lights, and also into Mountain View. So it shows you where all our projects are for the next few years. We presented about 3 weeks ago to Chris Schutte and a group of others from the planning department and gave them some recommendations on what we can do to amend Title 21. Right now it's will the telecoms go ahead and participate, and how do we get them to enforce, how do we enforce it to have them participate? So that's where we stand at this time. That's, I think, where we wanted to get to in terms of discussion points, and so open up to questions.
Who has to make that determination whether or not they participate?
By Title 21,
Public utilities?
it's directed that all utilities that are on the poles
Okay.
will underground their utility.
And does it differ around town whose poles they are, whether they're Chugach's, ours, or some of the telephone utilities?
In talking to my peers over there at Chugach, they have the same problems too. If you take a look at Mr. Dunbar's area along Tudor and around the curve, you'll see a lot of poles that were topped. They took off their power lines, but they topped the poles, and all you see now are comm lines that go along Tudor. So they're having the same problems too.
So how do we solve it?
So
What's needed in order to solve that problem?
Title 21, Chapter 13, talks about the enforcement portion of it.
Okay.
In fact, in the letter that Mr. Trainee had sent last year, as well as per the attorney's office, municipal attorney's office, they also opined all the way back in 2014 that says the municipality, should be able to enforce that, and if not, then you're going to be charged from $50 to $300 per day for not participating in the underground effort. So it's unfortunate it takes letters from the assembly to go ahead and do this,
Yeah.
or letters from constituents to be able to go ahead and do this, but they're not willingly participating in the planning effort. And then in the case of this year, not participating at all.
Well, we did have the problem down in Valley of the Moon area where we undergrounded ours, but the I think it was GCI or whoever had their lines down there didn't deal with those. It was our poles, but we left them for them, obviously. And then when they did bury theirs, then we had to go back and take the poles out. Is that what's happened?
What's supposed to happen, correct me if I'm wrong, Jake, is that we give them a time frame to which, after we take our lines down, then we transfer the poles to them. Whoever's highest of the two telecoms now assumes, and we transfer the poles to them. So they have,
Is that custom or is that regulation?
that's just the process that we've had.
That's what we're gonna do.
That's the process where we had, and so those poles have transferred to them. And because we have a joint user agreement only with GCI but not with ACS, because ACS is not elected to sign a joint user agreement with us, we transfer the poles. So in Eureka, over the Fireweed, over the North Star area, if you take a look at that, we left up about how many poles?
In Eureka, about 40.
Poles. And we'll go into the residents afterwards, and the comment to our folks was this was a dismal failure because we took down all our lines, but yet you'll see little poles, and if you drive by on Fireweed and look into the Eureka area, North Star area, you'll see the heavy telecom lines that are still there, as well as all the poles and all the lines that go direct to the houses. So we took our lines down and met the ordinance, the intent. And each of the telecoms, again, are given 5 years' notice of when these projects are, so there's plenty of time to go ahead and do budgeting for this. So you asked me what can we do. The ordinance has to be enforced. We just need to go ahead and make sure that somebody's doing it. We can't go to you can go to the RCA to try to get the RCA to do it to them, but we think it should be from the municipality's perspective, not just MLP. Because there's us, there's Chugach, there's
Sure.
NBA, that all of us are affected.
Yeah, Mr. Dunbar and then Mr.
So I guess this is a question for you, Gary, but also for you, Dick, since you've probably been doing this for a long time.
Don't say how long.
So, Gary, you just said we need to enforce it, but my understanding was it doesn't really have teeth against GCI and ACS because they're not utilities. And if that's the case,
We don't
then
have any control.
what's the justification? Why not change the ordinance to change our law to make GCI and ACS, when we're going to do this anyway, they have to participate?
It's where you talk to them and you determine are they a utility or not a utility. Based upon the definitions within Title 21 as well as Alaska statute, a telecom is a utility.
Right, although they've fought very hard at the
Not a
federal level
municipal
to make
utility.
sure that they're not utilities. Wait, so they are utilities under this code?
In the time, yes.
That's
As
what we
well as
have
in the
attorneys
Alaska
for.
Alaska statute also defines anybody that's
So I guess
on
I'm
poles.
curious, I don't understand what's happening here then. I don't understand why,
Why it's not being enforced.
yeah, why aren't we enforcing it?
And I have other questions. And I'm in queue.
I've
been
been
waiting
waiting
since
called
the
on.
beginning.
All right.
Okay.
Chris, go ahead. We'll
I got a
get
few.
to that
Okay.
by the end of the next 5 minutes.
So for 2018 or 2017, you said GCI did participate, ACS did not, and so we left up poles just for ACS.
The lines that are in Eureka are both
They're both
ACS and GCI. GCI participated in the ones that are here downtown. So what happens is, and when we're talking to the planning department, each of the utilities are supposed to turn in their 2% report
Right.
to the planning department. And we have met those requirements. The telecoms, what we understand, have not. And you're going to have to defer that to the planning department to see whether they have or not. But in this case, they did partial and they did a couple alleys with us.
All right, so now you said that we transfer the poles to the highest utility, and then you said that that isn't something that you believe is required to be done, that we're doing that just as practice. So my question is, can we transfer those poles to the real estate department and then charge usage fees or rent, lease on those properties to the point where it becomes more expensive for them not to participate than for them to actually play well with others?
We've discussed with the attorneys of how we could go ahead and do the transfer of it. We looked at it as, should we keep them or not? We said, no, we want to transfer the liability. So there is an opportunity, if you keep the poles, you know that AT&T and Verizon are coming in here and wanting to get on top of the poles so they can put their cell opportunities to go ahead and generate revenue for the city. But to transfer them to them, there's got to be a mechanism to do that within our joint user agreement. That transfer, according to the attorneys, is sufficient, and they just get them. And here's the cost: $30 per pole.
Right, and so I think that instead, I would contemplate, can we transfer them to real estate, because then it's unregulated outside of RCA, and then we have the means to tackle the question with the tools that we have. And so,
Keep the liability and charge them.
yep, make them pay.
There's liability. What's the cost to take a pole out?
When we do it, it's not.
Top the pole, just take.
No, not top it.
Just actually take it out?
Yeah.
In dollars, it's probably $700.
Yeah.
We make it.
And obviously, you want to do a whole bunch of them, and there's a declining scale when the more you do. Okay. Mr. Trini.
Dean, could you take a look into this for us and see what coercive methods you can write into an ordinance so we can get these poles taken down? Because I've tried for the years, and we've been successful in some cases, but every time it's a darn fight, and it shouldn't have to be. Once the electrical line comes down, at the same time you're taking yours down, they should automatically be forced to join with us. Because otherwise, the public doesn't understand it. We keep telling them we're undergrounding, but all they see is a pole there. They think we're lying to them. So if you could write something in your coercive, polite manner, I'd appreciate looking at it.
I'm sure. She mentioned that Mr. Constance asked me to give this several months ago, is why I've been looking at it. And what Mr. Allegron said, the telecom communities are required to participate, but to an extent, there's limitation on that participation. The ordinance was first enacted in 2005. I think I should point out one thing here with the circumstances are that the electric utilities that own the poles, MLP, CEA, and MEA, their service areas on the whole municipality. The telecom, they serve all customers in the municipality. They have a much wider area to cover. For example, the MLP's area, they have to spend that 1%, 2% of their annual revenues on undergrounding the lines. GCI, they have to spend 1%. Our code says up to 2%. It doesn't say required 2%. State statute says they're required to spend 1%. But they have the wider area it covers. They can spend 1% in these areas and not get to participate in areas where MLP is spending their amount that's required for undergrounding. So that's where I think that they can get out of the participation requirement. So there's a bunch of other issues here as well. That's one that's come up and identified. And in terms of enforcement, Mr. Agron is right. We've got the RCA process, filing complaint and seeing what they can do. The RCA's authorities supersedes anything that we do. RCA's jurisdiction. If there's any conflict in our code or in our enforcement or in our ordinance, RCA, they supersede what we have. So I don't know if there's anything there that supersedes what we want to do yet, but I will look into it. And then finally, I think there's the Title 21 enforcement, like Mr. Agron mentioned. I understand the department's looking into that right now as well. They have received annual reports from GCI and ACS. I'm in the process of getting those. And then another option, it's interesting, there's a special assessment option. You can form a special assessment district if they want underground lines. I asked about that. That's never been used in the past. That's really just adding an expense to local property owners in an area where they're already spending for electric service, utility service. That's supposed to pay for undergrounding. So I can understand why that's never been used. So our fourth option is amending code, like you mentioned, and I will get to that one further.
Mr. Chairman, we're at 12 o'clock. So
Yeah, just one last comment, and then we've got to go. But it seems to me we need the process first, the cooperative process, in terms of how, in our planning effort, we notify and we try to work with them. Anybody that's got other lines on those poles. The second is we need a requirement for a new development or new extensions that they be undergrounded. And then we need a definitive enforcement effort or tool, if you will. So it seems to me the best way is to get them to cooperate voluntarily, and if that doesn't work, then we need to have that.
Can I make one comment? As Mr. Gates mentioned, they are going to say that, for example, ACS has told us that out of their gross revenues, only $450,000 of their gross revenues would apply to the Anchorage area. And they say that they'll apply it either to the Chugach or to the MLP areas. That's when I work with my peers over there, and both of us are saying we're not getting anything.
Yeah.
So they've got to be, part of that has to be showing where in that 2%, where they've conducted their undergrounding of their work.
How do we set our priorities?
There is a process. It's inside that. It's inside the pamphlet that I gave
Okay.
you. The bottom line is that we have a 7-step methodology of seeing where we want to do it. The Rogers Park area, the community councils have a lot of input into that area, as well as where we have in terms of problems with reliability. Reliability comes first, but the community councils like Rogers Park, Everett Heights, they've had a lot of feedback where we need to get these things done. So you'll see those areas where they've been underground the most.
Okay, good. Yeah, I've got to end, but go ahead.
Can I read one sentence here about priorities?
Sure.
So in code 2107 or 16, its priorities should be based on undergrounding in conjunction with the electric utilities, essential system improvements, and then by target areas that's set forth below in no particular order of priority. So they can choose whatever target area is on the list, no priority depending on where it is. But also preeminent to that is how to keep the utilities, essential system improvements in place so they can continue to provide continuous service, right?
Okay. As we do road upgrades, we also try to underground as a part of the projects when we can, and where we are.
I would like to request a special meeting. We spend a full hour on this topic, and we bring in ACS, GCI, Chugach, and MLNP, and begin that discussion in a public and frank way. Because if we just continue waiting for cooperation, every other year we're going to have a failure, and this next year it's all over this district. And so, please, let's organize a special meeting with those.
You've got to have a hammer in order to require them to come in and do
I
it.
agree.
This isn't new.
I know.
We did this 2 years ago.
Yep, every other year it's going to happen because I think we fall asleep.
You can see what kind of hammer you can legally correct to get their attention.
Yep, and let's have a meeting with everyone to begin the cooperative
I
discussion.
think
Well, if we filed an ordinance and had a work session, it would be
Yeah, of course they
the
would.
That's what we
1%
did before.
expenditure requirement. Say, well, have that, it's no matter how big our
probably
area
requires
is.
your credit.
If we can bring that back in the January meeting, we should be able to plan a way forward at that time.
By construction season, which is April.
Okay, end your meeting so I can start the next one, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.